Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Suriya: The Last Horizon. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Suriya: The Last Horizon. Thank you to Hex House for sponsoring this video. You can check out their link down below for everything that they have planned. They have an upcoming Kickstarter campaign, and that being said, please keep in mind this is a prototype copy in front of me, so all rules, components, and things like that are subject to change. Now, that being said, Suriya is going to be a game that mixes deck building along with area control. Now, the game that I'm going to be showing you is a two-player setup. However, there are slightly different rules adjustments based on how many players that you're playing with, because this is going to be a head-to-head game where you are racing to the finish. Now, you are trying to build out your different bases with your own deck building, and that being said, you're also trying to take out your opponent's troops and miniatures that are here on the board with all of the cards that you are going to be using. And in a two-player game, if you're able to destroy your player's headquarters, you would also be able to win. But the main point of the game is that you're going to be trying to develop your deck and put out these different bases, because as soon as you have all of your bases out in play, that's also when you would win the game. Now, in front of you, I have a two-player game setup, but it's a little bit lopsided just to give you full visibility. So over here for the Scarabs, we only have their troops showing, but you can't see their actual cards beyond the board, whereas over here we have our Crytaas, and you can see all of their cards available. Now, I'm going to get into how you interact with those cards and things like that, but just know for the sake of this example, this is kind of the player that we are behaving as. So at the beginning of the game, players will draft and then place out these different terrain tiles, and they're all going to have different effects when you're playing the game. I'm going to go over general gameplay first, and then I'll show you what some of these different tiles do. But at the beginning of the game, you're going to set these out and choose your different factions that you're going to play as. Now, your factions are going to have a starting 7 cards that are all identical for all of the different factions, as typical with a deck building game. However, you are also going to gain cards from your particular faction, or you can gain cards from this general market as well. So it's very unique that you are not having the same access to all of the same cards as your opponent. You have access to your faction specific cards that you still need to purchase to be able to deck build, but then on top of that, you do have access to these different cards as well that everyone has access to. Now, at the beginning of the game, you are able to discard some of these cards showing, so that is something that you are able to do to move through those so that you have better options available, because visibility of those 3 cards and what you are able to purchase is something that you are always able to see. So we'll go over again what the round structure looks like and when you are gaining those cards, but just know as a player that you are always able to see those 3 different types, and also you have different bases that give you slightly different abilities. Now, those bases players do know with your faction, so just keep that in mind. Throughout the game, players are going to take turns back and forth going through a few different phases of the game. Now, the first phase of your turn is going to be an upkeep phase, and that's going to matter for some specific cards. For example, we have one of the Scarab cards over here, and for this one, you would have to pay 1 mineral to be able to play it during the play phase. However, during the upkeep phase, you would also have to pay 1 mineral to keep it round over round. So for cards like this during the upkeep, if they have that in the circle here for their cost, you would have to pay the mineral round over round to choose to keep it. Now, any round you could choose to discard it again, and this is deck building, so it will eventually come back, or if you have the minerals to be able to pay to do so, you could pay to keep it round over round. Now, after the upkeep phase, players are going to go into their action phase, and that is when you're going to be playing your cards. So you're going to start off with a certain amount of minerals. That's the only resource in the game. This is basically your money. And you start off with a certain amount, but different things will gain you minerals, one of them being that at the end of every round, you will also gain minerals as well. But you can see here that all of the cards vary in cost between 1 and 4, and you know, that's not indicative of anything specific except for what the starting hand is, but you would have to pay those minerals to be able to play these cards. Now, you are able to play as many as you can afford, and looking up at the center row, there are some that, depending on the amount of minerals you choose to play, that will change what happens. For example, over here we have a great weapon, summon 1 elite unit at your base, and it has a cost of a 2 or a 5, meaning that you can either summon 1 or 2 elite units depending on the number of minerals you choose to pay for that card. Now, a main part of this phase is going to be playing your cards. It's what you're going to be working toward, and if you're not playing certain cards this round, you might be planning to play them the next round. So this is when you're going to be doing that, and I'm going to go over a lot of what the cards look like specifically after I go through all of the phases, so that way the game just makes sense to you. So other things that you are able to do on your turn is discard a card for a mineral, so you are able to discard them to gain more minerals to be able to play other cards. And another thing you're going to be able to do is use your command token. So there are command tokens, and you start off with one, and you can eventually unlock more, and those command tokens are going to be how you activate your different squads for the area control aspect. So you're going to be moving your squads around, attacking with them, and extracting minerals, and that's what you're going to be using your command token for. So for the Crytaas here, you can see that we have the 3 command tokens that are not yet unlocked. However, this is the command token that we would be able to place with a squad to have them activate different things. So for example, here we would be able to have them extract a mineral, or I would be able to use this to also move this squad as well over here. Now I am going to move on to the next phase after that, which is the income phase, because again, I'm going to go over all the cards and the cool things they do after I explain the game. But during the income phase, this is when you're going to be able to remove those command tokens, so you'll be able to gain them back for future turns. If there are any exhaust tokens on a squad, you would remove that instead, and exhaust tokens prevent you from being able to use your command tokens there because they're just too tired. And then after that, you'll be able to gain a few different things, one of them being either a card from your personal faction market or a card from that center row. So this is where you would have that decision space of which cards you want to gain, some of them being public knowledge and your opponent knowing what you're gaining, or some of it being a bit secret and honestly a bit more synergistic, that it works a lot with your different factions, because once you start seeing how the different cards interact with each other as you get stronger and stronger and build out your deck to be more personal to your faction, you'll see just how strong the different factions can be. Now after that, during income, players are going to gain both minerals and cards depending on the number of bases that they have out in play, which is your progression marker for the game of how far you've moved along. So for example, each player starts off with a headquarters here, starting them off with 1 base, meaning that they are able to gain 2 minerals and 3 cards during their income phase. So they'll draw 3 cards from their current deck. If they have to, they will reshuffle their discard pile and then form a new draw pile, and you will also gain those minerals that are so precious that you will need in the future to be able to play your future cards. Now after that, your turn will end and you will be leaving some of your units exposed here on the terrain for other units to move in. Now, since we've talked a lot about bases, let's cover that for some of the cards that we are going to talk about. So you have this first base card that starts off in your deck, and it costs you 4 minerals to be able to play it, and you can build a base at your squad. So this is how you're going to place out your first base, and then there are future cards such as Settle Down that will let you place out future bases. Now this again does cost you 4 minerals to be able to play, but once you do so, you are able to place a base down where your squad is. Now your bases can provide different abilities for you. For example, we could take this base and place it here. Now this base ability is actually pretty cool, and this one is called the Mothership. And with the Mothership, you can actually keep your base pretty safe because it can move around with you. So for the Mothership, if your squad moves, you can choose to try to move the Mothership with it by discarding a card. If you don't have a card to discard, you can't, but that's a way for you to keep your Mothership with you and keep it pretty safe, because these bases are something that you want to be putting into play, and they are something that can be attacked just like any of your other units. Speaking of units, that's going to be another huge aspect of this game where you are trying to summon out your units and use your different squads to gain control over these different areas, because you want to do that to build out your bases. So here you can see that we have our different types of enemies. Your smallest ones are going to be your basic units, and then you have your elite units, and then after that each faction also has their general units, which they are also able to summon and use as well. Now there are some cards that allow you to upgrade. For example, if you have a basic unit out, you are able to change it into an elite unit, and everything that matters with that is going to be the dice that you are rolling and the amount of hit points that they have during this phase. So each of your basic units is going to have 1 hit point and provide 1 copper die for you during battle, whereas your elite units are going to provide a silver die and also have 2 hit points. So they are a bit harder to kill, and they do take a bit more damage. Now I'm going to go over a scenario for you for combat, just for you to see exactly what that would look like. So let's take one of these elite units over here from the Scarab team and pretend that they were here over in the desert. And then over here in the forest, I'm just going to put in one other of these units. That way we have 3 basic units. Now, in order to perform an attack, you would have to use your command token and place it within your squad, and then they will attack an adjacent area. So here, in the forest, the Crytaas would be able to attack over here to the Scarab, and the Scarab is also able to counterattack as well. So first, for attacking, we are going to roll 3 of these copper die, but on top of that, because we are the attacker, we are also able to roll this black die as well. The attacker always gets an advantage in that case. However, this one is going to roll a silver die against that. So I'm just going to roll both to show you what would happen. Alright, so we have 2 hits here from the elite, which feels pretty dangerous. We have 2 hits here on the attack die, a hit and a shield, and then this one is actually a T. Now what a T means is tactic. So there are certain cards called tactic cards, and you are able to play those when those are rolled. You are also able to play it out of combat, but if it's during combat, you are able to play it, and that is when it's very cool because they do not have a mineral cost when it is played as a tactic card when rolled on the die. That's because this can be very tricky and hard to do, but that's a reason you would be able to use a tactic card. So they would be able to assess 4 damage this way without blocking anything, so this elite unit would definitely die. However, it also has 2 damage going back. However, there was 2 shields rolled, meaning that the Crytaas won't be hurt at all, no damage taken, but they will be able to take out this enemy unit. Now again, this command token would stay here until the upkeep phase, so that would stay there for that player. But another thing to note is that there are different elevation levels. So you can see them here that we have different elevations throughout this game, and depending on the number of players, there will be more of these placed out when you are playing, but they are going to give you an advantage. So when you are on a higher elevation, you are able to choose and re-roll 1 die, making it even more possible for you to be able to play those different tactic cards against your opponent. Now to take a look at the different terrain, these are all going to affect players in different ways. So for example, the headquarters, it makes it a bit easier for you to fight in, where you get +1 shields and +1 damage. However, there's something like the desert over here, which gives you the same exact thing, but you need at least 5 troops in this area. So this 5+ means that if you have at least 5 units on this specific area, then you would gain the bonus of +1 shield and +1 damage. Similarly, over here in the mines, you can see that you need at least 3 units to get +1 shield and +2 damage. Alright, and now I'm going to go over the starting 7 cards that all players start with so you can see how you really get starting and going in the beginning of this game. So you have first base, which as I said is how you place a base out. You also have the troops, summon 1 basic unit at your base, and then you have 3 of those, as well as 2 the weapon, summon 1 elite unit at your base. Now again, as you are placing out future bases, you are also able to place units in other places as well. And then we have the general, summon a general unit at your base, or you can activate the general unit skill at no cost. So I will show you some general unit abilities in a bit, but before we do that, I wanted to show you some of the faction cards for this faction. So this is where you're going to start to be able to really deck build and augment the different things that you are doing. But for example, here we have progress, gain a card as the income phase. So this is a way for you to gain even more cards faster because you're going to be able to gain 1 through this card as well as during the income phase. So this is a way for you to move forward and a great one to start off with you in your deck. Another one would be Royal Decree. Until end of turn, faction card play costs 2 less. This is something that's very great for you to be able to purchase, especially once you have cards that are worth at least 2, which I'm going to show you now, some of the expensive ones. We have here Plasma Shower. Choose adjacent hex to your squad, roll 2 elite dice, and take that much damage. So you would be able to choose somewhere next to your area and roll 2 of these and just deal that much damage. Now that was only 1, so it wasn't great, but it's still a pretty cool attack. And then we have here banking, discard a card, and gain minerals equal to the cost of that card. So for example, my next card here costs 5. I could discard this to gain 5 minerals. However, I think you're going to like this one. It's Plasma Beam. Choose a direction from your base. Each hex on that path, roll 2 elite dice and take that much true damage. So you'd be able to go through and do a whole bunch of damage with this Plasma Beam if you're able to work up toward it. Now here is an example of a general unit that this faction would be able to use, which is De Aromas. They have a passive ability in your turn. If the total cost of your played cards is more than 8, you may draw a card and gain 3 minerals. But there's also an active ability, gain X amount of minerals, where X equals the number of bases that you have in play. So that ability will get stronger and stronger and gain you even more minerals as you have more bases out in the game. Now, throughout the game, players are going to move through those 3 phases. At the beginning of the game, you start off with just 2 basic units on the board, and then you have to pay your minerals to summon as many as you can. You're going to be building up your different squads, trying to build out these different bases throughout the game, but a huge part is going to be those cards that you are gaining. It's going to feel a little bit slow at first, like classic deck building, where you have your starting cards, and you're going to want to be drawing those really special faction cards, but as soon as you start getting into a groove of thing and adding more and more to your deck, you're going to start to feel more and more powerful. Now, this game definitely does feel like a head-to-head combat where you're not only trying to craft your own deck, but you're trying to keep an eye on the board and everything that's happening, because where the bases are placed and this area control puzzle is what the game is really going to come down to and who wins at the end of the day. Now again, players are going to go through that upkeep phase where they choose to pay the cost to keep any cards in play that they would like, and then after that they will go through their action phase of playing any of the action cards that they are able to afford, and on top of that using their command tokens here to do different things, perhaps extracting minerals to be able to play even more cards. Now as you gain more control over more command tokens, you're going to be able to do more and more throughout that as well, and then after that players will go to the income phase where they're able to take those different command markers back. They will gain their cards, and most importantly, they will gain minerals and cards depending on how many bases they have in play. So as I said at the beginning of the game, with 1 base, you will gain 2 minerals and 3 cards. However, by the time you have 3 bases out in play, you will gain 3 minerals and draw 4 cards during this income phase. So you can see where it's very important to be placing out these different bases and having them able to augment how many minerals and cards you are able to draw to get access to those faction cards faster to try to beat your opponent. Now, one of the best parts about Suriya is going to be the replayability and the different factions that you're able to try out, because you only are working within that market of the general market or your factions market, so for you to be able to really learn all the different factions and the synergies and the cool things they can do, you'd have to play them all. For example, our Scarabs over here, they love building tunnels and maneuvering around the board and being a little bit sneaky, so things like that can be very cool, but as you saw, the Crytaas are focused on growth and just going as quickly as they can and gaining all of their cards. So all of the factions do play very differently and very unique. Now, another thing that's very different about the game is the player count setup. Depending on the number of players, you'll have a whole bunch of more of these out in different levels. So again, depending on the number of players, the game can really, really change. This has been a preview of Suriya The Last Horizon. As I said, you can check out the Kickstarter link down below for everything that they have planned. I've been Professor Meg, and thank you all for watching the Board Game Code channel. I'll see you next time. Bye!